Aloha kakahiaka yaka ko apau. Today I'm Hawaiian, because if I forget that, I just say I'm also Hawaiian. But I would like to say good morning to all. And to honor one of the other language is that Palauan, when they say good morning, they say tu tau. But in Samoan, tu is to stand, tau is war. So I'm standing up here ready for war. but but anyway, thank you so much for getting up early in the morning. For those of you who are from the Pacific, I know it's 2 a.m. in the morning in the Pacific. Some of you is 4 a.m. in the morning. So I'm very, very grateful that you're awake and you're smiling and you're ready for our sessions. So I'm just have some announcements. The first one is that for those of you who are not here in the past 2 days, we're very high tech here in Arkansas, that we have a automated response where you can go online and the information is on your table. Put the link up and then there's a site that will come up with your code. Put your code in and then you can actually ask questions and a question will come up here and then Melissa will field it. So depending on our time, we will, Mr. Capelle will answer the question. If not, we're actually gonna have a webinar, between now and the next conference to actually answer some of your questions. So that will be the one of the reasons why we have the questions up here. The second announcement is for CME. So for those of you who want CME, please go and check in with the CME table. We want you to have all the credits for being here. And other than that, I want to say enjoy the conference. I know there's a lot of wisdom, insights, and a lot of love and aloha going around. Really appreciate that.
Yahweh, everyone. Good morning, everyone. What an honor to stand in front of you once again. But this time, we have a very, very special guest with us today. And what an honor to stand in front of you to introduce him to you. Alfred Capelle is a senior statesman, linguist, scholar, and humanitarian from the Republic of the Marshall Islands, who has devoted half of this century to the protection and advancement of Micronesian cultures, languages, traditionals, education, and values. He has gone by many titles, and when I say by many titles, Mayor of Ligiep Atoll, ordained deacon of the Catholic Church, Chief Executive Officer of Alele Museum, President of the College of the Marshall Islands, Ambassador to the United Nations from RMI, and Chairman of the Customary Law and Language Commission. He is co-author of the Marshallese English Dictionary, published under the auspices of the Pacific Asian Linguistic Institute by the East-West Center, as well as the author of a Marshallese novella for children and young adults entitled Pela Kilomedo Ega Wadada. Currently, Chairman Capelle is completing the Marshallese reference grammar with Dr. Byron Bender, Professor Emeritus and former chair of the Department of Linguistics at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, and Dr. Louis Pocoto, Chancellor of Kapolani Community College. In his present tenure on the Customary Law and Language Commission, Chairman Capelle has been instrumental in developing language history, customary law, and cultural education programs which support revised Ministry of Education policy that extends bilingual education through high school. Under his leadership, CLLC has initiated a bilingual and bicultural education project that aims to assess ongoing bilingual education needs among Marshallese communities in urban centers, to produce dictionaries, textbooks, workbooks, teacher guides, and distance learning materials for the schools, and to further build institutional capacity. Chairman Capelle lives with his family in Medero. May I introduce to you Chairman Alfred Capelle.
Maybe a minute. Okay, come on. Yahweh Gomayalap, Rojirim Chadril of Christ. Good morning to all of you, brothers and sisters in the Lord. Before I begin, I would like to thank Almighty and loving God, our Father, for His love and care, and for bringing us all together here safely in good health through our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Komoltada, Melissa Lailang, thank you very much, Melissa Lailang, for those kind words of introduction. Secondly, please allow me to greet you, which I have already done in Kajin Majal, but once again I will say, greetings to you all. Next, I would like to thank Dr. Nia Aitaoto and also Melissa Lailang for making it possible for me to come to this meeting. If they didn't do it, I would not be here. And I want to thank the officials, the leaders of this great university for hosting us and for allowing me also to be giving to you this speech this morning. They have done a great job as far as we've heard from the talk of the Chancellor yesterday or the day we started. I was impressed with what this university is doing in collaboration with our Marshallese community, ACOM, which our sister here, Melissa, established and is ably leading for the Marshallese. I want to also thank all of you for coming this morning so that we can all listen to each other and dialogue and see what we can do to resolve our issues and problems. I want to recognize all of you and say, Komol Tata. It is an honor and a privilege to be able to speak to this renowned group of health professionals, educators, and Pacific Islanders from all over the Pacific, gathered here today in Fayetteville. And now to begin the story. Allow me to start with a quote from Linda Tuhi Y. Smith, a Maori activist and internationally known Pacific Island scholar who is Professor of Indigenous Education at the University of Waikato in Hamilton, New Zealand. By the way, the proper and also the other official name for New Zealand, as some of you may know already, is Aotearoa. I say it again. It is Aotearoa, which in Maori means long cloud. That's because the Maori navigators who discovered Aotearoa recognized that the particular cloud formation they saw from far off as they approached in their canoes was marking the location of a very large island, something that we Pacific Islanders and great navigators all recognize and can be very proud of. But back to Professor Smith. In talking about the Wato, Wato is a Marshallese name for a tract of land which can also house a village. So it's a Wato or village where she grew up. She writes, and I quote, "Unemployment, ill health, and poverty underpin what on the surface look like idyllic conditions. Young people are sent away to seek further education and employment. Many people live on welfare benefits. Once in a while, someone dies violently. Others simply die of heart disease, cancer, respiratory disease, diabetes, rheumatic fever, suicide, accidents, and so forth. Disillusioned young people try to make sense of their lives while being put through training programs to prepare for work in communities where no one is employing." End of quote. Linda's comments could just as easily have been made about my islands and the other Marshallese here, called the Marshall Islands, or about us as Marshallese, both at home and in diaspora here in Northwest Arkansas. On the surface, we Marshallese come from two idyllic chains of coral atolls just north of the equator in the Pacific Ocean and slightly west of the international dateline. However, because our islands are burdened by deep poverty, overcrowding, and little in a way of job opportunities, a story and the reasons for which I will return to later, our people must look overseas for further education and employment. At the same time, we are plagued by disease, with diabetes, heart disease, and cancer being the most prevalent. Our young people become confused, disillusioned, not knowing where to turn to or what to believe in. There is little left for them but to identify with modern consumer society and all of the individualistic, competitive, and materialistic values that are associated with such a society, including, I might add, junk food. And please add to this crisis of identity among our youth the fact that many educators and authority figures here in Arkansas expect, even demand, of our young that they assimilate and become fully American in their lives, lifestyles, and work habits. All of this, I believe, helps to further erode our culture, our language, and our health. Please keep in mind that I am not a health specialist myself. I am a Marshallese, and I have devoted the major portion of my life to the protection and advancement of Micronesian cultures, as Melissa said earlier, languages, traditions, education, and values. As such, I am deeply honored to have been asked to speak before this esteemed body of researchers, healthcare providers, public health leaders, and community members who work with Pacific Islander population here in Arkansas, throughout the U.S. and abroad. I hope that what I have to share with you today will in some measure, small measure, add to the goals of this gathering in contributing to the development and implementation of strategies to reduce health disparities, and that in so doing, it will also contribute to the protection and advancement of our Marshallese language and culture. Very important. But first, let me talk a bit about how to kill a language, how to kill a culture, and how to kill a traditional healthy lifestyle. It takes 3 generations. That's right, 3 generations. It only takes 3 generations to kill a language. It only takes 3 generations to kill a culture. And it only takes 3 generations to kill a traditional diet and make us all dependent, unhealthy, and demoralized human beings. So let's begin with language. Imagine the following scenario. A Marshallese family arrives in Springdale. Neither of the parents understand much English, but the children, the first generation in our story, speaks a little and quickly learn once they start school. As the children become proficient, they are often called upon to translate for their parents. This frequently happens when the parents have to go to municipal offices or businesses to fill out a form or comply with some local regulation. While the children deeply love their parents and are happy to help, they are also embarrassed because their parents don't speak English. And by the time these first generation children grow up and are ready to get married and start a family themselves, they swear that their children will speak real English so that they don't have to go through the same embarrassment as their parents did. And that is exactly what happens. Their children, now the second generation, grow up speaking only English. Although, since they often hear Marshallese spoken by their parents and grandparents, they do understand a little bit of their language. They just don't speak it. Now, when these second generation children grow up and have children, we arrive at complete loss of the language. This is what happens in the third generation, and it's why we say that it takes 3 generations to kill a language. At this point, however, a very interesting thing happens. Keep in mind, these third generation children are monolingual English speakers who have completely lost their heritage language. And guess what they ask their parents and grandparents? They say, "Why didn't you teach us our language? Why did we have to lose it? Now, Dr. David Hoff will be talking about this issue later this morning in his address on why it is so important to provide long-term, sustainable bilingual education. I would just like to add here that this phenomenon of third-generation language loss is common among immigrant or diaspora families worldwide. It is not just a Marshallese phenomenon. It's Italian Americans, Japanese Americans, Algerian French, Turkish Germans, Sudanese Finnish, Pakistanis growing up in Great Britain, and Pacifica, members of the Pacifica community growing up in Auckland, New Zealand, and so forth and so forth. Without a strong bilingual education support structure, it appears to be universally inevitable. The same thing is true of culture. With the exceptions of certain holidays and cultural events which are celebrated by the wider immigrant community, such as we will see this week on the celebration of the Marshallese Constitution Day, and the so-called cultural events where children are encouraged to dress in a particular costume or bring a certain kind of dessert to school to demonstrate cultural diversity, the deep cultural values and traditions are also lost within 3 generations. This is called assimilation and is generally considered an important key to success. We are frequently told by teachers and authority figures that in order to succeed, it is necessary for immigrants to assimilate into the wider society, not only in terms of language, but also in terms of customs, cultural norms, values, and work ethic. We are further told by these same authority figures that those who fail to succeed have only themselves to blame, that their failure is due to their inability or unwillingness to assimilate. In other words, it is their fault. This kind of messaging takes a serious toll on diaspora populations. Let's look for a minute at some of the psychological results. Lack of appreciation of one's culture and values and language. Feelings of inferiority and humiliation when exposed to the dominating culture. Denial of one's heritage, culture, and language. Self-hate, which can either be internalized or externalized. For example, domestic violence, alcoholism, or suicide. Colonization of the mind, learning to perceive oneself and the world through the Western eyes. Retarded cognitive development based on American benchmark educational standards. Increased dropout, repetition, and failure rate in school. Problems such as these are endemic to indigenous communities worldwide. They are not voluntary, but are brought about by the domination of one language and culture over another, and they extend to the killing of indigenous diets. Let me get some water. Now, how about food? Prior to the destruction of our traditional ways of life, Marshallese diets were filled with both nutritious and delicious foods that allowed us a better quality of life than we enjoy now. The historical record shows that early colonizers who visited our shores were surprised at how tall, strong, and healthy we were. In fact, This kind of observation about the health of indigenous peoples is common among colonizers the world over. From the Americas to Africa and Asia, European conquerors found indigenous peoples to be healthier and more physically fit than they themselves were. So what happened? Let me share some stories, beginning with the atoll of Bikini in the Marshall Islands, and the removal of Bikini Islanders from their homes to another island called Kili Island without a lagoon, just a single island all by itself, whereas Bikini has a big and beautiful lagoon. This first generation that was sent there was given American military food. I think they called it sea rations or something to live on. That's actually where spam, S-P-A-M, spam, came from. Did you know that? Anyway, the Bikinians hated it, but their children got used to it, and by the time the third generation was born, the canned food that we know today was the preference. So, that is an example of diet change, which was caused by forced removal. Another way in which diet can be altered involves the forced change from a subsistence economy to a labor economy. Here, two things can happen. First, people no longer have the time to take care of their breadfruit trees and taro patches and other food plants. Alternatively, they lose cultivatable land because people are migrating to find work, and the population increases beyond the capacity to feed those who live away from their home island and their traditional food sources. We find this both on Majuro, the main center, Majuro Atoll, and Ibai in the Kwajalein Atoll. Very crowded. In either case, it takes 3 generations before traditional diet is completely destroyed. A third and even more serious cause is dependence on imported foods, created by what some call the free market economy. Increased reliance on imported foods rather than traditional foods is brought about because they are affordable, cheaper. Imported foods are the major contributing factors to poor diet and increased rates of obesity. Where poverty exists, food preference is not sufficient to ensure a healthy diet. The low cost and wide availability of imported foods, especially high-fat meat products, result in nutritionally detrimental decisions to consume cheaper, nutrient-poor foods rather than healthier alternatives, such as fish, taro, and breadfruit. Here, what I want to say to my Pacific Island brothers and sisters. I want to say to you, my brothers and sisters from the Pacific Islands, it's not our fault. It's not our fault. Dr. Hoff, who will be speaking at the final breakout session on language and culture later this morning, has a cartoon on the wall in the back of his desk at the office, our office in Majuro, which depicts a young boy at a lemonade stand selling an iced drink to a passerby for 10 cents. Around the corner, you can see another man who has just purchased a drink and gasping for breath and crawling to a second lemonade stand. In front of that stand, there is a sign that reads, "Iced drink, antidote, $10. In some ways, this scene is not too different from the reality we just discussed of healthy foods being replaced by cheap junk food. The ice drink sold from a lemonade stand in this case, which then requires an antidote. We get hooked on all that important junk food, which gives us diabetes, and then we have to fork out even bigger bucks to get cured. This is the classic addiction syndrome. And who is it that profits at both ends of the exchange? Those in the developed world who created the problem in the first place are also profiting by selling us the cure. This is an important place where we need your understanding, my brothers and sisters, and we need your help. We must hear you as health professionals join us in saying to our Pacific Island brothers and sisters, it's not your fault. We further humbly request that you join us in accepting the notion that indigenous solutions also have a place in the research agenda. As respected experts in the field of public health that you are, we believe that these are vital components to any successful community outreach program. This understanding is also necessary in helping us secure funding for our programs. Allow me to repeat. First, do not blame the victim. Please, do not blame the victim. Second, include indigenous ways of knowing and being in the research agenda. By the way, indigenous ways of knowing and being are sometimes referred to as indigenous knowledges. Indigenous knowledges. Note the plural, knowledges. The key here is that our search for solutions not be limited to Western views of what is scientific, but include approaches which privilege indigenous worldviews as well. This is essentially a process which can be called indigenizing a research paradigm or indigenizing the agenda. Let me describe briefly how it might work. The best way to begin is by examining some of the more salient similarities and differences between Western and indigenous science. First, while there are some in the West who insist that true science can only be deductive, the truth is that we both use inductive as well as deductive reasoning. So, this is an area of commonality. The second issue involves values. Very important. While Western science likes to claim to be objective and value-free, it needs values to give it direction. This is one area where we are very strong, since all of our science is value-based. Let me just list a few of our values here, and I take this from work that Dr. Huff and others, important people, have done. First, generosity and sharing. Generosity and sharing. Second, caring for each other. Third, collectivism as opposed to individualism. Fourth, cooperation as opposed to competition. Fifth, relatedness to one another as well as to nature. Sixth, spirituality. Seventh, respect for individuality and individual difference. Eight, matrilineal bonds, which generally include gender equity. 9, respect for elders and wisdom. 10. Intergenerational learning. 11. Patience. 12. And finally, the use of time and space as a function of the above. Of course, these are values can be found in all cultures. The important thing to understand here is that indigenous cultures in general have in large part, due to the subsistent nature of their traditional economies, stressed these values. Granted, there are pressures to change as economies shift to market-based forms of capitalism. But many indigenous peoples still give priorities to these traditional values. And what is more, they have application not only in our daily lives, but also in our scientific research. Sometimes these values are referred to as traditional ecological knowledge, or in short, TEK, TEK. Winona, Laduk, and Anishinaabe, and prominent Native American activists defines TEK as the culturally and spiritually based way in which indigenous peoples relate to their ecosystems. This knowledge is founded on generations of careful observation within an ecosystem of continuous resonance and represents the clearest empirically based system for resource management and ecosystem protection. Native societies' knowledge surpasses the scientific and social knowledge of the dominant society in its ability to provide information and management style of environmental planning. End of quote. It is TEK that has enabled us Marshallese to become the world's foremost navigators, including other Micronesian societies, to build world-class ocean-going canoes. It has also enabled us to produce ribbit, that's Marshallese word for those who massage you so that you can get healthy, get back your health, and maintain your health. Ribbit, or healthcare knowledge holders whose specialized knowledge and skills were superior to many Western medical practices. The anthropological record is full of accounts of this, starting with the first day of colonization. Observers noted that in the 19th century, for example, Samoans had superior technologies. That's NIA. I'm talking about Samoans. Technologies for mending broken bones than Westerners. And with the exception of diseases imported from the West, indigenous healing practices were also seen as superior. Unfortunately, however, since arriving here, I have heard a few stories which tell us the opposite, that indigenous people, including us Marshallese, are ignorant and backwards. I have heard health professionals here in Northwest Arkansas, for example, say that we have no science, that our people don't know what health prevention means, that we are lacking in words for body parts and so forth. I have also heard some people here refer to our ribbit or traditional healers as being unqualified and secretive quacks that Marshallese choose to go to as their primary care providers only so long as their ailments are not so serious. Rather than trying to understand and accommodate these two different traditions, however, some people seem to think that those traditional Marshallese practitioners should be identified and their practices stopped. They also think that the Marshallese practitioners are secretive because they know they are unqualified. I would like to suggest that the secrecy is a cultural value that has nothing to do with having something to hide. Instead, it comes from a basic difference between Western and indigenous approaches to science. Western science is supposedly open, but allows for patenting and profit-making. Indigenous science, on the other hand, respects the sacred knowledge of the knowledge holder and the research methods that go with that knowledge, but does not allow for profit-making. Among indigenous knowledge holders and healers, it is widely believed that to pass on sacred knowledge to the uninitiated may result in death. To make personal profit may do the same. On the other hand, when a knowledge holder reaches a certain age, he or she will look for someone to pass this knowledge on to, someone who can be trusted to preserve the sacredness of this knowledge. My question to you is, what should we do about this friction between Western and indigenous approaches to science? Can we find ways to accommodate these different worldviews? In her book entitled Indigenizing the Academy, Angela Wilson suggests the following: we must look at the truths within our forms of knowledge and bring them forward to the modern world, while simultaneously working to transform the modern world to create a society more in tune with our traditional values. End of quote. So, this is one possibility, my brothers and sisters. Having said that, however, we also must keep in mind that we are dealing with the legacy of colonialism and colonized relations in science and research, as well as the academy. Margaret Kovac, Ni Yao, and Saltok notes, and I quote, "From an indigenous perspective, the reproduction of colonial relationships persists inside institutional centers. It manifests itself in a variety of ways, most noticeably through Western-based policies and practices that govern research, and less explicitly through the cultural capital necessary to survive these. The result has been, and continues to be, that indigenous communities are being examined by non-indigenous academics who pursue Western research on Western terms, regardless of whether research emerges as a positivist, constructivist, or transformative paradigm. It is still researching indigenous people, and it is still deeply political. What I would like to suggest is an approach which combines both Western and indigenous science, but which is embedded in indigenous values. Here, I would like to introduce the term for 7 generations. This term, 7 generations, comes from Native America and also reflects an almost universal indigenous worldview that in order to sustain our relations throughout the cosmos, we must also consider how to preserve them for our children, our children's children, and their children and children's children for 7 generations. If we do this, we may have the chance we may have the chance to save our humanity and the planet. This is what science should be about. And with this in mind, what follows is a short list of ways which we at the Customary Law and Language Commission in the Marshall Islands, CLLC for short, believe we can work with you to protect and promote our language, our culture, and our health for the next 7 generations. First, that CLLC set up a permanent office in Springdale area where we can work together with Marshallese, both Marshallese and other Pacific Island communities in the Northwest Arkansas area, neighboring Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas. 2, that we work with you to teach people how to use official standardized orthography, which I should mention is available online for our Marshallese brothers and sisters. That we conduct a survey of Marshallese living in diaspora to determine what the linguistic and cultural needs are. This will be of great help in determining what kind of interventions are most suitable for us as we move toward greater integration of our efforts. 4, that we set up a Marshallese Language and Culture Institute so that we can work closely with local colleges and universities and will allow us to apply for stateside funding. 5, that we work with the local community to assist in setting up a charter school and further aid that school and the local boards of education in developing a Marshallese as a second language curricula. 6, that we work together to print books in Marshallese and other Pacific Island cultures. CLLC is collaborating with the Republic of the Marshall Islands public school system to develop bilingual textbooks for the schools. We would like to see if and how these books can be used here in Arkansas. We would also like to partner with the community here to write some of these books. This, I might add, includes kindergarten to 12th grade books on health. 7, that we help each other in finding sources of funding. This is one of our biggest challenges. There are so many things we can do with the talent we have, but without the proper funding, it is very difficult to get much accomplished. 8, that we coordinate in the area of employment and job openings. We have, for example, an opening for a translator position at the CLLC office in Majuro. And while the pay is not competitive by Arkansas standards, it is a place where we might be able to make some beginnings. The end of the story and the beginning of another. Allow me to end by returning to the beginning. And another quote from Linda Dewey Wow Smith. I quote, "What is more important than what alternatives indigenous peoples offer the world is what alternatives indigenous peoples offer each other. The strategies that work for one community may well work for another." End of quote. Here, I would like to suggest that we link up with indigenous peoples who are nearby to explore what alternatives we can offer each other. There are many things, for example, that we can learn from the Cherokee, who are right across the border in Oklahoma. They have been here since they were forcibly removed in 1843 from the East Coast by President Jackson. They have their own governance and have worked hard to protect their language and culture. We congratulate them and maintain their health. We can also learn from other minority communities in our immediate area. The Latino community, for example, has had many of our same experiences, and there is much to be learned from them as well. There is a Marshallese saying, a word for this process, very important, and I'm sure all of my Marshallese brothers and sisters here know what it is. But I would like to introduce it to you, my brothers and sisters here in Northwest Arkansas. The Marshallese, it's called, we say it in Marshallese, Chidram Capelle. Chidram Capelle. And can be roughly translated. Anyway, I think this is the translation of it. It's called, we say, wisdomizing. Is there such a verb as wisdomizing? Well, we have one now. Wisdomizing. Wisdomizing. Chidram Capelle. It is a process by which you face your elders' forehead to forehead, and absorb the elders' knowledge through dialogue. So, my brothers and sisters, let us Chidram Capelle. Thank you very much. Komol Dada. Mahalo.
Parang tijat.
On behalf of Uams and all of your brothers and sisters from the Pacific and the audience, we'd like to fafitai and thank you for being a voice of our elders and then also of our ancestors. It's an honor to have you here to bestow upon us the word of wisdom from the Marshallese culture, but then all of the Pacific culture. Mahalo nui yaoi.
So thank you so much, Chairman Alfred Capelle, for the rich speech. I want to remind everyone that you can still submit your questions, so we can ask Chairman your questions. I do have one as of this point, Mr. Capelle. How can Western health professionals show respect for indigenous health practices while following the medical standard required?
That is a question that both sides need to work together on. I cannot answer for them, but I'm sure there are ways to find a solution to that by coming together and jidraming, wisdomizing. That's the best way to do it. Dialogue, talk about it, and come to. I'm sure these are educated people, both sides, so they should know how to deal with the issue and come to a solution. That's easy.
There's another one. Do you think there's more value in creating bilingual electronic books when creating books?
Oh, yes. It's very important because we can easily share across vast distances. If you have electronic materials, you can send them through the internet and page book. All these things we can do. We have the technology to do that. So we should not only put them in hard copies, but make them available online, just as we have the dictionary. Our dictionary is online, and everyone can download and look at it and learn the Marshallese language words.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you. Mia, I think it's time for us to break for our breakout session, or go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So all our breakout session will be back at the Chancellor Hotel, but please come back here for our closing ceremony. We have a great plenary session also on the intersection of business and health. So and continue to enjoy the conference. And if you have any questions, we have a lot of great staff that can help you. Thank you.